Hello, welcome to another episode of Born in Eastern Roman History. This next video is going to be on Nikephoros Melissenos. He was born in 1045. His family hailed from Asia Minor. He died on November 17th, 1104. He was of noble descent from both parents, who belonged to two old aristocratic families. His father was a member of the Bortzes family, and his mother was a member of the Melissenos family. Now, for reasons unknown, he decided to take after his mother's last name and not his father's name of Bortzes. Um, his father was not really mentioned as it being anybody of importance. I don't know if that had a factor, as well as the family was kind of on a decline. They were from a powerful military aristocratic family that was real prominent in the 9th and 10th centuries. Um, they were Both families were prominent in Asia Minor around the theme of Anatolikon and the region of Antioch. Um, there was quite a few family members on both sides that acquired high offices in the Eastern Roman army from the 8th to the 16th centuries. More so the later centuries with the Melissenos family, not the Bortzes. He did marry Eudokia Komneni. She was a sister to Alexios I, and the second born daughter of the Kyriopolates John Comnenus and Anna Delesny. So he had strong ties with quite a few of the most well-known and powerful aristocratic families, from the Bortzes, the Melissenos, the Lessenos, and Comnenos families. So his military career is not so well documented, only on a few times later on in life. 1067, he held the rank of magistros and a military governor, so we would call a duke, of Triaditsa in Bulgaria. And in 1070, we have him fighting alongside his brother-in-law, Manuel Komnenos, who was used by Romanos Diogenes, who was the emperor at the time. So Diogenes was unable to lead a campaign into Anatolia due to a lot of civil strife in the capital. So he did send Alexios's older brother Manuel, who had strong bond with the emperor. Um, so Romanos entrusted his army with this Manuel and Nikephoros, and they both were captured fighting the Turks near Sebastia. So I'm not going to go into a long story about it, but basically Romanos was seeing that Manuel was having quite some success, where previously Romanos was not in his other campaigns, and due to maybe jealousy and other things, he ordered him to split his army, which really hindered Manuel being under strength, and they ended up being defeated by the Turks, and both were captured in Sebastia. Now, Manuel and Melissenos were able to convince a Turk named Ariskal or Erebusgan, other writings of him, his name, or under his Greek name was Chrysocholus, to help them escape. So this Chrysocholus was a brother-in-law to Alp Arslan, and they were having a falling out. So Manuel and Nikephoros were able to play onto this and talk this Chrysocollus into helping them escape, which they did, and they ended up going back to Constantinople with Chrysocollus and his men, who actually enter into imperial service, and Romanos bestows the title of Prodros on him. So this was a, in a sense, a big success, because here we have I would say, probably a pretty decent size force of Turks loyal to this Chrysocollus, ends up going to imperial service. Now, Melissenos remained loyal to Michael the Seven Ducas, who was emperor between 1071 and 1078. And in October 1077, Nikephoros Botaniates rebels, and he was at the time the strategos of the Anatolic theme. So Melissenos was rewarded by receiving Botaniates' post of strategos of Anatolia. Botaniates takes Constantinople in April of 78, and Melissenos is rewarded with exile to the island of Kos in the Aegean Sea. So that was his reward for being loyal to that douchebag Michael the Seventh. We have in September, October, late autumn, 1080, Melissenos leaves Kos and returns to his estates in Asia Minor. And historian Anthony Caldelis does mention pretty much in his book, how did he really escape exile from Kos and amass such a large following, gathering an army in Asia Minor? We don't really know, but he does. I guess it really just shows that Botaniates was really losing favor in Asia Minor. He, as I'll go on later, will explain like how Botaniates really did open the door, as well as Melissenos, when they both rebelled to try to go for being the next emperor. Really relied on Turks to fill in the rank and file, and used them to help garrison a lot of these cities that opened the doors to them. So it did really open up Pandora's box in completing the complete takeover of Central and Eastern Asia Minor. But it's kind of funny. He just kind of, Melissenos copies Botaniates, like I said. It's like a domino, one by one. Cities in Western Central Asia Minor open their gates to him, and he just wisely places these Turkish troops to garrison these fortresses, just seal the fate of Anatolia. So, February 1081, Melissenos takes Nicaea, where he is proclaimed emperor. Botaniates tries to send Alexios to squash Melissenos' rebellion, but he refuses on the grounds that his army is, one, too small, and secondly, it's a brother-in-law. And this doesn't stop Botaniates, who sends a loyalist army under the eunuch John. Along with him came George Paleologos. God, I cannot say that name. And Kortikes. So George and Kortikes were both cousins. It stated sources that they were defeated almost without battle and withdrew to the capital. So were they defeated or not? So when you read a little bit more, and the histories written by Nikephoros Briones the Younger, you will see that he does go along in his histories and talks about this Protovestarios, John, a eunuch, who was in long service of Botaniates, was sent with an imperial army and tasked with bringing down the rebellion of Nikephoros Melissenos. George Paleologos and his cousin Kortikes accompanies John on his expedition, giving him sound military advice, which was churned down, ignored at every turn, bringing disaster. The depiction of John is scathing and mocking, drawing on a standard negative stereotypes about eunuchs, instability, and ambitions. So, which is kind of funny, they talk about this one first joke about this eunuch John, and is Alexios is giving his army basically to John, and a farewell thing. Alexios puts on this little performance with a horse exercise for his troops. John sees this and he's like, okay, he's a little surprised. He gallops after him, and immediately everyone roared with laughter and mocked him by saying the usual clue, clue. I guess it was a joke for eunuchs. And I guess the translator and the author and the Ville were like basically talking about how they don't know exactly what this clue clue meant, but I guess it was funny to see a eunuch on a horse because he has no balls. But yeah, I guess it was a good inside joke for if everyone was really laughing. So this George Palaeologos explains to Anna Komnene and Nikephoros Briones about how John betrayed him in Constantinople after George had saved his life in battle. The eunuch John had begged George to save him, which he did. He was portrayed as being arrogant, cowardly, and lacking military leadership. So I guess there was some kind of pitched battle, maybe with one of the first few of the forts they came upon that was garrisoned by these Turks to try to retake back. And he must have lost the battle, was saved by George, and whatever was left of this army that was defeated marched back to Constantinople, and that was that. I just don't really understand why, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows maybe more in detail, why out of all the generals that Botaniates had, why would he send this eunuch as the main military leader of this expedition? Not George or Cortices or any of these other guys. I just don't understand why this eunuch that was never ever mentioned before, but entrusted with such a task of bringing down somebody that's trying to usurp your throne. But anyways, so March 1081, Melissenos camps at Demolis on a shore across the Bosporus from Constantinople. There he received word about the revolt of the Komnenoi against Botaniates and proclamation of Alexius as emperor. He sends letters to Komnenoi suggesting a division of authority over the imperial territory, with the Balkans remaining under Komnenian control and himself keeping Asia Minor. And he emphasizes that the empire should remain formally united. In a reply, the Komnenoi offered him the title of Caesar, the second highest title after the imperial title itself, and to give him the governance of Thessalonica, which was the empire's second most important city, if he would submit to that. So Melissenos at first refuses this offer, but after seeing the coup was being successful, he accepted it before it would be reneged. At the same time, Botaniates tried to forestall the capital's fall to the Komnenoi by sending for Melissenos and asking him to enter the city to assume imperial authority. And they go on about the story how the envoys were stopped by, who we just mentioned, this George Palaeologos, that never reached Melissenos by ship. They were going to try to send envoys by ship to basically ferry him back into the capital where he can take over. And the kind of question is, why would Botaniates prefer Melissenos to take over as being the emperor over Alexios? Now, was it because Alexios, we saw, was very successful at taking down Basileikis' rebellion, squashing that, and also Nikephoros Briones the Elder? So I don't know if he took this to heart and was like, okay, here's one of my most trusted generals. I don't want to give it to him. I'm going to give it to Melissenos, maybe to later pit these two against each other, and then whoever comes out the victor, he can deal with later. I don't know if that was part of his game plan. We have April 8th, 1081. Alexios is crowned emperor, and Melissenos entered the capital and was bestowed the title of Caesar and Duke of Thessalonica. Alexios was smart to create a new title of Sebastocrator, which was above the rank of Caesar, and made Isaac, his brother, that title, bypassing Melissenos as being next in line. So that was very smart. Historian Chenet believes Melissenos was probably more concerned with safeguarding his Asian estates from the Turks rather than claiming the throne, and who Alexios granted him Thessalonica and equivalent estates around it, some of which Melissenos later distributed to his clients, like the Bortses family. He readily gave up his contest for the throne. Okay, that's pretty good by Chenet, but I don't really fully agree with that. Safeguarding his Asian estates and the Turks, because as you see, he basically just sealed the fate of Anatolia by allowing these Turks to garrison these key places, which I'll go on to talk about. Well, I can do it right now. By doing the same thing about Botanides did, he gave them Ionia, Phrygia, Galatia, and Bithynia. So this completed the peaceful takeover of Central and Western Asia Minor for good. So I don't know how he was protecting his estates from marauding Turks when he just basically gave it all up. I mean, it does make sense later on. You'll see that what he was given by Alexios, he does, reward his other family, the Bortses. But we already saw that they were not even really in the mix of being a powerful military aristocratic family anymore. They more or less, I'll talk about later, like go into the more of the civil service in the later centuries. But yeah, I think they all just kind of packed their bags and moved over to the West out of Asia Minor. Um, Melissenos does become a faithful follower of Alexios for the rest of his career. So the guy was very loyal. Um, I mean, he was married into the family. He did elevate his career and really secured his name and title with being, a follower of Alexios. Late autumn 1081, we see him marching alongside Alexios in his campaign against the Normans of Robert Guiscard. In Battle of Dyrrhachium, he is commanding the right wing. The battle resulted in a Norman victory due to the left wing under Pacrianos collapsing. So it seems that when you read more of that battle, that Melissenos was successful in, holding his line and making some advances into the Normans' um, flank, but it seems that the main victory resulted, with Pacrianus collapsing, and ended up being, a huge defeat for the Eastern Roman Empire. In 1083, he campaigned in Thessaly against the Normans under Guiscard's son Bohemond, who were besieging Larissa. Alexios had Melissenos pretend to be him wearing imperial purple with his detachment of the army. Now, that was kind of interesting because Alexios has Melissenos wear the imperial purple and have a detachment, making it just kind of like seemingly obvious that this is him. And they do this like fake fight between him and Tetichios, where it looks like they're disagreeing, and Tetichios is fleeing off, exposing the emperor in a small detachment, and then this sends Bohemond to go, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this, go in, and ambush was sprung by Alexios and resulted in Bohemond getting defeated. In 1086, we have he lost a battle against the Pechenegs at Galoy. The Pecheneg leaders wanted to kill the captives, while the common soldiers wanted the prisoners to be ransomed. So Melissenos was instrumental in having the orders to have them killed rescinded, and Alexios was able to pay off the ransom. So Alexios receives a letter that Melissenos writes about terms and conditions when they were being held in Barrow. He was one of three commanders of the left wing, and now, so he was actually one of the main causes too of this defeat, with his left wing was being routed and resulted in his capture. Now, Tetichios and Castamonites was all escaped. They were part of the left wing as well. Well, it's kind of confusing because they have Tetachios for sure on the left wing with Melissenos, and the left wing got routed and resulting in Tetachios escaping and Melissenos getting captured. But this Castamonides, they have him sourced as some being times at being on the left and sometimes being on the right. So I believe he probably had to be on the right side because I don't really see any other commanders being on the right for that battle. In 1090, then it kind of has a gap with his history till we get sped along to 1090. Theophylactos of Ohrid wrote to Kaiser Nikephoros Melissenos about the Canicon. States that in this letter that Theophylactus would like to be the one to raise the Canicon from more villages. In 1091, we have Alexios celebrated the victory over the Pechenegs, and Melissenos characterized Alexios' victory over the Pechenegs near Charabakchoi as a useless joy to the Romans and a harmless pain to their enemies. It did not stop Pecheneg raids. We have in winter of 1091, Alexios orders Melissenos to go to Anos and recruit new Bulgarian and Vlach troops with any others he could find, not veterans, because he wanted to use these other Bulgarian and Vlach troops more for garrison duty and have these veterans that he can find and round up where they may be being sent over to fill in Alexios' ranks for battle. And still in late 1091, so this would be winter, Melissenos was sent to liberate around where Theophylactus was still where Theophylactus came from. So Theophylactus sent Melissenos 200 small salted fishes during Lent to help him and feed some of the soldiers. Melissenos missed out on the Battle of Libonian. That I talked about in another video. Libonian being just the massacre and complete destruction of the Pecheneg as a force. And he met with Alexios at Kala Dendra, where they exchanged stories and congratulations. So Melissenos was still out recruiting soldiers and actually missed out on the battle and slaughter of the Pecheneg people. They have still in 1091, so a lot went on in 1091. Samuel Bortses was granted by Melissenos the Parasian of Rousseau at Briai. Basically, Parasian is a suburban house, so this is one of the properties he gives him in the west that he inherited. We have just this donation being confirmed in a crystal ball by Alexios. 1094, Melissenos was at Philippopolis, along with Alexios, about charges and plotting against Alexios from his nephew Ionas Komnenos, son of his brother Isaac. So what happened is this Ionas was being called out for basically treason and rebellion against the Emperor Alexios. And Alexios didn't believe it, did an inquiry about it, investigation, where Melissenos was adamant about Ionas being involved, but Ionas was being fully cleared of any charges of wrongdoing. Nothing ever further came up with Ionas being a threat to Alexios. So I don't know how much merit this accusation held. Probably not much at all, because nothing ever arose again. In 1095, Alexios collected an army at Antiochus and summoned Melissenos to go to Barrow and keep an eye out for a Cuman army that might be approaching. 1103, fast forward, see quite a few years, nothing. 1103 refused to hand over the Prostorian to Konstantinos Bortses, who had transferred other properties to Iveron in exchange for it. So he gets involved in one of his family members and refuses to hand over a home to this other family member named Konstantinos. 1104, Melissenos, suffering from ill health, was greatly upset by the death of Sebastocrat or Isaac Komnenos, and was encouraged and consoled in a letter from Theophylactus, which was sent with a present of 500 salted fish to ooze his sadness. So this Theophylactus really was a cheerleader for Melissenos. So he must have did a lot for this man from whatever documents have survived, these letters and what. This kind of talks about Melissenos had built beautiful buildings at Dorleon, which ended up later being destroyed, like the rest of the city, by the Turks. So again, that's all him. These cities being destroyed and what, because yeah, he allowed the Turks to settle in. So the Dukas family, of course, allowed the Turks to come in what in the 1040s all the way through the 1050s, and then these two guys, Botaniates and Melissenos, just went ahead and just sealed the fate of Asia Minor forever. And well, not forever, but until the Crusaders came, they started recovering some. But inevitably, it became the Turkish control. um, Going on about his description from Anna Komnene, he was well born, wealthy, wise and admirable, a noble man. He did really fast track in his military career, and that again we've seen time and time again. Anybody married into the Komnenoi family really elevated militarily and civilly. So he did become a magistros and around 1065 to 1070, attesting to a seal found in 1071. They dated to about 1065. He was a Vistarches and a Catapano of Cyprus between 1067 and 1078, with a seal being of 1073. He was a Podros and Strategos of Anatolican from 1078 to 1081. A seal dated from 1078 for that. We talked about he was the Duke of Traiesa. And then he was a despot, if I'm saying that right, from 1081 to 1104, dating from 1093. And that was backed by this Theophylactus of Ohrid. Basilius per Anna Komnene, and an autocrator late 1080, early 1081, with a seal attesting that he was autocrator of the Romans. So, had a great military career. A little bit about I'm just going to talk a little bit, bore you guys, I shall say, bore you, with a little bit of the Melissenoi family and the Bortzes family, which I found kind of fascinating. I mean, this probably could be a separate thing, but, if you want to hear it, here it is. The Melissenoi family can be traced back to Constantine V, with one Michael, who was the Patricos and Duke of Anatolican. This family was part of the military aristocracy. Other notable family members were the brothers Leo and Theognostos, who we all know took part in the rebellion of Bardas Phocas. Later, we see the family lose the military aristocracy and transcend into more civil service during Manuel's reign. So I guess Manuel Comnenus really kind of started weeding out some of these old noble aristocratic families. Not all of them, just like the Melissenoi. The Bortzes were like really nothing with him as well. We have the Bortzes states lineage is either of Arab or Armenian origin. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I'm probably butchering that last name. You guys can correct me on that one too, if it's Bortzes. We do see the first prominent family member was a Michael Bortzes, who was already a Patricos early in the career from 930 to 996. I mean, so for most of his career, but from 930 up. But he fell out of favor with the emperor at the time was Nikephoros second Phocas. And he was actually one of the conspirators that assassinated him. And then we have this Michael Bortzes appears again with Basil II, switching from being loyal and serving the rebel Bardas Scleros back to being Basil's man. But nevertheless, Basil, for this wishy-washy, playing both sides, it's kind of surprising how Basil actually favors him and points him Duke of Antioch again, and Magistros, which is a post that he held till like 995. So Michael Bortzes was always seemed like the Duke of Antioch. I think he took it back like in 969, I believe, if history is correct. And then he was always like this Duke of it, all the way to 995, until he basically falls out of favor because he just cannot really handle fighting the Fatimids. And Basil's just like, okay, he just cashiers him out. He's done. He's an old man. He's done. But and we know, like we said, the family really origin probably came around Antioch, so they had a lot to lose there. Um, so, like I said before, both these families, the Melissenoi and Borges family, both come from the Anatolican theme. They were both had multiple marital alliances within those two families, so they were really held together with loyalty and marital. Constantine was. So there's another one. Okay, Constantine Bortes was a patriarchos under Basil II and one of his closest associates. So Constantine was blinded by Constantine the Ninth, who ruled during 1025, 1028. And this blinding, I believe, happened, if I'm wrong, uh, during the early stages of this Constantine the Ninth's reign. There was another Michael Bortzes, referred to as a seal they found as the new Michael Bortzes, which is interesting. This was dated in 1057. So this Michael Bortzes the new was a Vistarchis and a strategos of the Anatolikon theme. He participated with the Kmenoi, the Dukos, Ergaros, the Scleros, and Botaniades, and other military aristocratic families in revolt to make Isaac Komnenos the new emperor. So that was kind of interesting how a lot of these military aristocratic families band together to overthrow the emperor and put Isaac on the throne. Now we can speculate what I was talking about earlier, why this Nikephoros Bortzes takes on the mother's name as Nikephoros Melissenos, but it probably was because I can only think of like the decline, like the status, the prestige of this Bortzes lineage, and they kind of probably had a big factor that the Melissenoi family was stronger, more powerful, higher status. What probably did go wrong with the Bortzes family, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, was the Bortzes, I believe, never intermarried with the Kmenoi family, which at the time held like all the high level positions. I believe that's why they only we can have them surviving till I believe the 13th century. I think there was a George Bortzes that became I think it was like the Metropolitan of Athens, something like in 1153 or something like that. And I think he died in the 1160s. And this George had a brother, Helios, who was a commander of the imperial treasury at the time. But this Helios was married to the Scleros family. So they still had some ties with the Scleros family, which you really didn't hear much of either going into these later centuries. But they were still around. Other than that, we just have that Melissenos was giving some of his estates to the Bortzes family's members in Greece, while land was abandoned due to the Turks in Asia Minor. So that was really it that I have about them. So it's kind of interesting too to see these families really on the top and then just kind of just fall to obscurity as time goes by. Thank you guys for listening. Please leave any comments. Thank you.